With the VGAs right around the corner and everyone discussing the debate between God of War Ragnarok or Elden Ring winning Game of the Year, I want to sidestep that conversation to focus on the award show itself. Now, I simply don't want to just bash the show and rip into it for no reason. Instead, I want to talk about the issues I have with the show and things I think they could improve upon with it going forward. So right up front, I just want to say that there'll be no personal attacks against Jeff Keighley or anyone else involved in the show in this video. I'm also not going to really focus or complain about the advertisement for upcoming games or whatever products happen to be there. Without revenue, this show simply would not happen. It costs a lot of money to put on these events, and at the end of the day, whether I like it or not, the showcase has to make money. Instead, I really want to focus on things I think are wrong with the showcase that could realistically be changed without just mindlessly saying the show is garbage. Now, before we actually start to analyze what is wrong with this showcase, I want to take a brief moment and welcome anyone new to the channel. If you are new and like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing. I have a ton of stuff in the works that I would love to share with you all. Also, if you do happen to enjoy the video, let me know by dropping a like. But we have a lot of stuff to get into, so without further ado, let's get into it. I would like to start by discussing the categories in the showcase. Many of these categories are basically the same thing. For example, we have Best Action Game and Best Action Adventure Game. What is the difference exactly? Honestly, it feels like one of these could be completely axed from the show. Another example is Best Debut Indie Game and Best Indie Game. I know there is an actual difference, but let's be real, we really don't need two awards for indie games. Just do best overall indie game and call it a day. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because while we have multiple categories for the same style of games, other categories just toss in multiple genres that are not mainstream in together. Look at Best Simulation Strategy. This year, we have Total Warhammer 3 going up against Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope. This entire section is basically any strategy game or simulation that they don't think is popular enough to be part of the main show and still want to include these so they look like they're part of the gaming community. The fact that we had Microsoft Flight Simulator go against XCOM shows that this category is just completely crammed with random games. It's just insane and honestly feels pretty lazy. It makes it very clear that this show is just for the mainstream and the popular genres, which is a real shame. I would even take this a step further and say that not only is it for the mainstream, it's really only for the mainstream story-driven games. The fact that we don't have a first-person shooter section is just bizarre to me. We have games like Call of Duty and Best Action Game going against Sifu and Ninja Turtles. Now, not only are the categories bizarre to me, it's also the fact that we have so many games being nominated in so many different areas. For example, in 2020, Hades was nominated for Game of the Year. And I'm not knocking Hades, it was an incredible game and did deserve that spot. But it was also nominated for Best Indie Game. Well, because it's a Game of the Year nominee, it had to win Best Indie Game, because if another indie beat it, it would just prove that Hades didn't deserve its spot on the Game of the Year nomination list. So you already know who's going to win Best Indie Game. It had to be Hades, otherwise the show would not make any sense in the way they pick Game of the Year nominations. Using that same logic, I could pretty much guarantee that Stray's going to win Best Indie Game and Best Debut Indie Game this year, just because it's a Game of the Year nominee. If it doesn't win both of those categories, then the showcase is just completely wrong in the way it selects their nominees for the different categories. So it kills any excitement for me of what's going to win Best Indie Game. I already know just from the list of the Game of the Year nominations. It's just too many games and too many different categories. It almost feels like we're just watching the same games compete for different awards. For example, look at Best Action Adventure Game. It's almost the same exact lineup for Game of the Year. So this basically means that if God of War Ragnarok wins Best Action Adventure, then we know that Stray, Horizon, and Plague Tale will not win Game of the Year. Because if God of War beats them in Best Action Adventure Game, there's no way it should lose the Game of the Year nomination. Once again, it just would not make sense, or at least not lose it to those other games. So by the time you get to the Game of the Year award, you pretty much can already know who's going to win just based on the other awards. Now, since I just don't want to sit here and complain about all this without offering any type of solution, I want to offer my thoughts and what I think they could do to improve the award show. So the easiest thing to do would just be to have a category for different genres of games. Best FPS or best beat 'em up style game. The problem with this, I know a lot of games are a mix of different genres these days. So this system, for it to work, each game would only be allowed to be in one category. For example, a game like Fallout would have to be in best first-person shooter or best RPG, not both. So many games have come out every year and get overlooked because we have a game nominated for 10 or 12 different categories. Another solution that I actually think would be the best way to do it would be, instead of doing genres or best shooter, best action game, have awards like best combat system, best shooting mechanic. This way, a game like Ninja Gaiden or Bayonetta could win best combat system, but might not be the complete package of that genre because of their lack of story and narrative compared to something like God of War. This way, let's just say hypothetically, I know they didn't come out the same year, but if they did, a game like Ninja Gaiden 2 won best combat system over a game like God of War 3. If it came to the Game of the Year award and both games were nominees, even though we say hypothetically you think Ninja Gaiden 2 has a better combat system, God of War 3 could have won Game of the Year because while it doesn't have as great of a combat system as Ninja Gaiden, it still has a decent combat system, but its story, narrative, music, art direction, let's just pretend everything else it had to offer beat Ninja Gaiden. It could win Game of the Year, but might not necessarily have the better combat system. So when it comes to that award, you don't know who's going to win. Whereas if it was just best action game and Ninja Gaiden beat God of War, but God of War won Game of the Year, it kind of makes no sense. So with that out of the way, let's talk about my other main issue with the show, and that is the show's length. The show is just too long. I'm sorry, but there is so much fluff that could be cut out. I used to love to watch these live, but with the way they're going, I usually wait and watch them after the fact so I can fast forward through a good chunk of them, or just wait till it's over, look up the winners and trailers online. There's so much that could be cut out. We don't want to see musicians performing on stage. We don't need to see Hideo Kojima announcing his podcast, and etc, etc. Cut these things out. Honestly, I feel like this show could be cut in half and not be 3 hours long or 4 hours long. It should be 90 minutes max. The show is realistically for the masses and the normies, not for the passionate gamers. And why I think that's kind of a shame, I really don't blame them. Their growth has been incredible. Back in 2014, they had 1.9 million people watch the show. Their viewership in 2021 was 85 million people. That is a dramatic jump in that brief period of time. To put that in perspective, the Super Bowl in 2021 had 112.3 million viewers. So the Game Awards is closing the gap, and if they keep growing the way they are, eventually they could have more viewership than the Super Bowl, which is insane to think about. But anyways, guys, that's all I really got to say about this, but I want to hear what you guys think. Do you agree that so many games are just overlooked because they're not in the right genres? Do you think the show is too long? Do you even watch the video game awards anymore? Let me know in the comments below. As for me, I got a ton of work to do, so I'm going to get back to the grind, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.